Since the early 90s, the Japanese Ministry of Education distributes textbooks for moral education to every school in Japan, the so-called Kokoro no Noto. Although not compulsory, the government seems quite keen on having them used in its classrooms. The purpose of these textbooks? To impart allegedly universal values to its readers about one's relationship with others, with nature, and with society. And in its chapter about society, Professor David Rear writes, the textbook invokes the metaphor of an orchestra in which each individual player makes use of their individuality to thoroughly fulfill their role within the group. As in an orchestra, nobody must play too slow or too quickly, as this will break the harmony of the whole. And if you think about it, the authors of Kokoro no Noto are exactly right. There's hardly a better setting to explore the relationship between the individual and the collective than a musical ensemble. After all, the success of an orchestra relies on every single musician performing at their very best, while at the same time coordinating with their countless colleagues. Every measure is a careful balancing act where each player has to stay in tune with the orchestra at large. In that light, it almost seems like sound euphonium is taking a metaphor that is familiar to generations of Japanese schoolchildren and blowing it up into a full-scale narrative. At the heart of the masterpiece that is sound euphonium stands that very idea, the tension between the individual and the group, both one's actual bandmates, but also, by implication, society at large. That's the core of Sound Euphonium Season 1, a breathtakingly beautiful drama series with strikingly political implications. This is a confession of love to my favorite anime of all time. Hello, my name is Sean, and this is the first installment of my comprehensive analysis of Sound Euphonium. To make sense of the exact ambitions behind Sound Euphonium, I first need to go even further back. The subject matter of this series, namely concert band, was actually a highly significant choice for anime studio Kyoto Animation at the time. In the early 2010s, Kyoto Animation was the studio most strongly associated with the moe boom, in particular through its 2009 anime K-On! In case you weren't around at the time, K-On! Was considered the poster child of anime about cute girls doing cute things without much further substance. On paper, K-On! Was about 4 girls in a light music club, but in actuality, the series spends little time on their musical pursuits and rather focuses on them hanging out, eating snacks, and doing other things that weren't very relevant to their ostensive club activities. K-On! Quickly gained incredible popularity in anime culture, and as a result, it also became the thing people would point at to decry the state of anime in the early 10s. So flash forward to 2015, when Kyoto Animation announced an anime about high school girls in a concert band. It was hard to avoid the impression that this would be basically K-On! 2.0. But instead, we got something completely different with Sound Euphonium. It's as if the studio wanted to prove that it could pull off a serious anime about music. A series that would capture the hearts of musicians around the world with its painstaking attention to technical details. Now there are, of course, plenty of differences between the two series, but I think that there's one detail in particular that distinguishes them on a fundamental level: their sense of scale. The main characters in Sound Euphonium don't play in a small band with their close friends, but in an orchestra with over 60 members. And this setting completely changes the social dynamics in play. The world of Sound Euphonium is filled with hierarchies, cliques, and unresolved conflicts. Everything in this series revolves around the tension between the individual and the collective, about when to pursue one's own interests and when to give way to the needs of the group at large. And one of the most stunning achievements of Sound Euphonium is how seamlessly it ties together this one theme on a micro and macro level. The series' overarching messaging comes about through the way it constantly compares and contrasts the personal journey of its protagonist, Kumiko Oumae, with that of its orchestra at large. Let me set the scene with which Sound Euphonium begins. We're at a regional qualification of Japan's middle school concert band competition. The moment of truth for Kumiko and her classmates. The outcome? Better than they'd hoped for. They got nothing less than a gold prize. Well, I say gold, but it's really only a so-called dud gold. Their efforts were lauded, but it wasn't enough to reach the next round. But amidst all the cheer and celebrations, one lone girl bursts out into tears. Kumiko's kind of surprised by this. Was Reina Kousaka really so relieved by the outcome? But as it turns out, Kumiko had completely misunderstood the situation. Unlike all her other bandmates, Reina is frustrated that they didn't qualify for nationals. Kumiko thoughtlessly drops a scathing comment. Did Reina actually believe they had a chance? Reina storms off, while Kumiko stays behind in confusion. Little did she realize that this brief exchange would change her life forever. We then flash forward a few months to Kumiko's first day at Kitauji High School. From the very onset, it becomes apparent that Kumiko wants nothing more than to leave her old life behind. In fact, she's chosen this school for no other reason than that hardly anyone she knew was going there. Kitauji basically offers her the best chance at a fresh start. She wants to make new friends and is also reluctant about continuing with concert bands. This comes out most strongly in her first scene with Shuuichi Tsukamoto. Shuuichi is her childhood friend and middle school bandmate, and he's also one of the few people who joined Kumiko at Kitauji. But even though he seems like a nice guy, Kumiko constantly pushes him away. From her perspective, this makes a lot of sense. Shuuichi is the walking personification of the past that she's trying to leave behind. So when Shuuichi announces that he's planning on continuing with concert bands, Kumiko's mind is set. She will definitely not join the school band this time around. Now, if you already suspected that Kumiko wouldn't actually follow through with this, you're completely right. On her first day at Kitauji, Kumiko meets Hazuki Kato, a girl who wants to join the orchestra despite never having played an instrument before. There's this touching moment where Hazuki manages to produce a sound for the very first time, and she just radiates sheer joy. Seeing Hazuki then reminds Kumiko of how fun playing music truly is, and this inspires her to give concert band one more try after all. And put a pin in this, since I'll be returning to Hazuki at a later point in this video. But that still leaves us with an important question. Where is Kumiko's desire to sever ties with her past coming from? The answer to this is gradually revealed over the course of the season. For Kumiko, playing in a concert band has been synonymous with conforming to the will of others. Kumiko started playing music 7 years ago, not out of any strong volition of her own, but because she looked up to her older sister, who played trombone during her high school days. Kumiko, however, wasn't allowed to follow her sister's footsteps as a trombone player. Each time she joined a band, she would end up with the euphonium, the unpopular, obscure instrument that nobody wants to play. The harsh reality of being part of an orchestra is that someone has to take one for the team, and Kumiko seems to have been easily pressured into this role. All this makes the euphonium out as the ultimate symbol of compromise. And to add insult to injury, there's a series of instrument plushies that Kumiko and her friends collect, but Kumiko had to settle for a tuba on her bag. The reason for this? The company behind the plushies didn't bother making a euphonium. So with all this, the series paints the euphonium as basically the second fiddle. But on top of this, there was also a traumatic incident during Kumiko's first year in middle school. At one point, Kumiko got bullied because she had qualified for a competition in the place of one of the senior students. This encounter taught Kumiko a clear lesson. Being part of a concert band means submitting to the will of others and getting punished if you stand out from the crowd. So with all this, it finally makes sense why Reina Kousaka's reaction to the Dud Gold Awards made such an impact on Kumiko. Reina is Kumiko's first bandmate with real ambitions, the one person who dares to go against the masses. Over the course of the series, Kumiko becomes absolutely captivated by Reina and her unflinching resolve to stand out from the crowd as a musician. And what Kumiko essentially realizes is that she has wanted to be like Reina all along. Now, all the pieces finally click together. Kumiko was so desperate to run away from her past because her encounter with Reina made her want to do away with the mediocrity that had characterized her life to this point. And this plays out on a romantic level as well. Now, Sound Euphonium is incredibly guilty of queerbaiting. That is to say, that it hints at non-heterosexual romances without properly committing to them. However, I genuinely believe that the series' not so subtle lesbian undertones add a lot to its overarching ideas and Kumiko's character journey, even if they never come to fruition. From the very first episode, Shuuichi is painted as Kumiko's obvious love interest. Kumiko's friends assume they're dating, and Shuuichi clearly has feelings for her. Everything about Shuuichi presents him as the safe choice. He's a sound lad, Kumiko's friend since childhood, part of the same club, and he'd start dating her in a heartbeat. But at this point in Kumiko's life, Shuuichi represents everything that has been stifling her, and instead, Reina is presented as the only person who can fulfill Kumiko's character needs. What Kumiko has been yearning for all this time is someone who will see past her attempts to blend in with others and embrace the facets of her personality that she usually tries to keep hidden from the crowd. Kumiko is seeking out the exceptional over the ordinary, and that includes the queer over the heterosexual. Kumiko and Reina share their most intimate moment in the series during their town's annual summer festival. Where everyone else joins the festivities, Reina invites Kumiko to climb their local mountain. Reina characteristically wanted to do something that nobody else would. And this is symbolized by how she rises up from the masses to a place where she can show Kumiko the view from above, as well as a beautiful, starlit sky that they are now closer to than anyone else. This is the moment where Reina truly opens up Kumiko's world, and Kumiko can only marvel at Reina's beauty. And at the same time, Kumiko is the only one who gets the crazy feelings that drove Reina to venture up this summit. And so, we see these two girls sitting on the hilltop, playing music together. Two people who have come to understand each other completely. And if that is not love, then I don't know what is. So up to this point, I've been discussing Kumiko's character arc in isolation. But at the same time, it's impossible to understand her journey without discussing the situation of the Kitauji concert band at large. At the start of this series, Kumiko is blunt about the state of her school's band. They're absolutely atrocious. The new students slowly discover that this is the result of a massive falling out in the previous year. A group of ambitious then first-year students clashed with the second years, who didn't take their club all too seriously. This led to the serious students quitting, and well, the results speak for themselves. Some of the current second years aren't even practicing at all. To think in intertextual terms, they're behaving as if they're in K-On! Rather than a serious music anime. So regarding this series' major theme of individual versus collective, it's significant that the Kitauji orchestra starts in the polar opposite direction from Kumiko. Where Kumiko's arc is all about learning to distinguish herself within a group, the orchestra at the start of this series fails to come together as a cohesive whole. They lack focus, ambition, and the drive to cast aside their individual desires for a greater purpose. Enter Noboru Taki, the band's new, inexperienced instructor. The series shows us everything we need to know about Taki in his very first scene. He's extremely knowledgeable and passionate about music, but also rather socially awkward and clumsy. On a very basic level, sound euphonium closely follows the outline of many sports films. A failing team gets a new coach who reforms their players and turns them into champions. But what's interesting about sound euphonium is that the Kitauji orchestra at times seems to improve in spite of Taki rather than because of him. In the world of sound euphonium, group dynamics and interpersonal communication matter much more than technical know-how. And these are exactly the areas where Taki falls short. One of the most important moments in the series takes place when Taki introduces himself to the Kitauji band. The teacher claims that he highly values student autonomy and asks them to settle on a goal for the year. Do they want to aim for the national concert band competition, or just have fun playing music together? Taki says that he's fine either way, and I believe he's telling the truth here. But what goes wrong is that the band puts the issue up to a public vote, and by doing so, the question becomes engulfed in the murky swamp of group dynamics and peer pressure. In this format, the vote is no longer about what the orchestra actually wants to do, but about picking the socially acceptable option. All this is reflected perfectly by Kumiko's response to the sudden vote. We see a girl who's absolutely terrified of standing out from the crowd, desperately searching for what the right answer is. So with all that, there's only one vote in favor of taking it easy. And from the shocked responses in the room, it becomes clear that the club kind of stumbled upon such a lofty goal. And Kumiko? In the end, she doesn't vote at all. With this, we're shown a failure of democracy. The outcome of a well-intended vote doesn't actually reflect everyone's wishes, because the band members prefer to blend into a faceless mob rather than sticking out their heads and speaking their minds. The incident from last year has left deep scars in the club, and Taki has completely misjudged the atmosphere. And what's especially interesting is what follows directly after the scenes about the votes. Throughout the first episodes, Kumiko feels incredibly awkward around Reina. After all, she had basically belittled Reina's dreams not too long ago. At last, she decides to confront the situation. Yet, when Kumiko is once again lost for words, Reina asks her if she's still playing the Euphonium. Kumiko affirms, and Reina just nods and walks off. But even though hardly anything had been said, Kumiko's tensions and guilt melt away. This is the kind of subtle juxtaposition that makes this series so brilliant. Taki's attempt to bring the club's future into the open has backfired tremendously, whereas Kumiko and Reina patch up their relationship by leaving everything unsaid. But in addition to Taki's shortcomings as an instructor, and I'll return to that point later, the club also suffers from an ongoing crisis of leadership. It comes as maybe no surprise that after last year's incident, nobody was particularly eager to don the mantle of club captain and pick up the shambles. The person who ended up with this responsibility is the third-year student Haruka Ogasawara. Haruka is a likable figure, but far from a natural leader, and that's something she's acutely aware of. And more than that, Haruka stands in the shadow of another third year, Asuka Tanaka. Asuka is one of the most gifted musicians in the club. Furthermore, she's smart, charismatic, and commands authority. In other words, most everyone in the club, and that very much includes Captain Haruka, believes that Asuka should have been the person to become captain. The only reason why Haruka ended up in that position instead is that Asuka staunchly refused the responsibility and settled on being just the vice captain. Yet, throughout the first half of the series, we see all these small moments where Asuka undermines Haruka's authority. Asuka is naturally quick to leap into action, whereas Haruka constantly hesitates when she's put on the spot. All these microaggressions really take a toll on Haruka, until she finally snaps. In Haruka's view, Asuka has forced her into a position of leadership, a position that she's not suited for in the first place. But Asuka swiftly cuts her off. In her view, it's Haruka's fault for taking on the responsibility. After all, Haruka could also have refused the honor, just as Asuka did. In a way, the dynamic between Haruka and Asuka parallels that between Kumiko and Reina. At the start of the series, both Haruka and Kumiko are people who put the needs and expectations of others above their own. Kumiko plays the Euphonium, Haruka becomes club captain. Not because they want to, but because someone has to do it. In their view, playing in an ensemble requires people to make sacrifices, and both of them have trouble going against the will of others. Reina and Asuka, meanwhile, have no qualms about prioritizing their own wishes over those of the collective. So with an inexperienced instructor and a hesitant captain at the helm, the very fabric of the club threatens to break down within only 3 episodes. Sunfest is around the corner, which is an annual high school marching band event that Kitauji always participates in. Yet, Taki threatens to pull the plug as long as Kitauji doesn't meet his rigorous standards. Here again, Taki heavily underestimates the importance of club traditions and social dynamics. The students now spend all their energy debating about how to deal with Taki's ultimatum, and some even suggest boycotting practice altogether until they're allowed to join the event. And despite her best efforts, Haruka fails to establish authority as club captain and unite the orchestra. That day, practice is cancelled. But amidst all this drama, one lone student refuses to go along with the petty club squabbles. That afternoon, the sound of a trumpet fills the air. It's a beautiful, melancholic sound. Dvořák's Ninth Symphony, the music of a homesick man in a barren, foreign land. This is Reina's cry of desperation, that of a musician trapped in the quagmire of politicking. And her plea, that of a single person daring to stick their head above the parapet, strikes a chord with Kumiko, with Haruka, with Taki. They all realize that they need to start afresh. If they want this to work, they too need to step out into the brave new world. But where Reina's individualism brings the club back together at the start of the series, her attitude threatens to tear it apart in its second half. Now that the Kitauji concert band has become serious about aiming for nationals, Taki announces that he will hold auditions for the parts in the competition. This decision again draws the ire of some of the club's older members. Up to this point, the parts were always allotted in order of seniority. And among all the parts, there's one role which is especially heavily contested: the coveted trumpet solo. Reina, of course, immediately throws in her lot, but there's one other club member gunning for this honor: the third-year Kaori Nakasuko. It's hard to overstate just how much goodwill the series creates for Kaori. Kaori is Haruka's closest confidant, and she played a crucial role in keeping the club from falling apart completely during last year's crisis. Moreover, Kaori is a victim of the club's former toxicity. In the previous year, all the solos were handed out to the lazy older students, even though Kaori was by far the better performer. And more than that, this is Kaori's last chance to get a solo, whereas Reina still has 2 more years of high school left. And despite all that, Kaori never shows any animosity to Reina for aiming at the solo. She even does everything in her power to stop others from picking on Reina for her aspirations. There's only one problem. Reina is way better than Kaori, and she has no intention of relinquishing the solo. Now here's the issue. If there was ever any character who deserved the sympathy vote, it's Kaori. That's how most everyone in the club sees it. In their eyes, Reina is the clear villain here. And more than that, the students discover that Reina and Taki have a prior history with each other, since both of their fathers are professional musicians. So when Taki hands the solo to Reina, many in the club are, predictably, quick to suspect Taki of playing favorites. Kumiko's friend Midori puts the finger on the sore spot. At this point, Reina should hand over the solo to Kaori. It's just not worth putting the peace of the club at risk for the sake of Reina's personal ambitions. Here, at last, we're shown a situation where it looks like you should sacrifice the individual in favor of the greater whole. What's also significant about the issue with the solo is that it's a mirror image of the voting scene at the start of the series. Taki's first ostensive mistake is allowing a public vote on an issue that should have been decided anonymously. Now, however, he puts the club cohesion at risk by holding auditions behind closed doors. So just like with the Sunfest debacle, Taki's decision stirs up tensions and grinds practice to a halt. And in another moment of crisis, some of the students are looking at Asuka to resolve the situation. Yet this time, their hopes are in vain. The inscrutable genius doesn't care about the whole situation. Like Reina, Asuka can't bring herself to care about anyone's personal issues. Here at last, the series implies that she might have been right to decline the position of club captain after all. And in contrast, the club's hesitant, reluctant captain rises to the occasion and offers her greatest display of leadership in the series. Haruka may not have been born a leader, but over the course of the series, she becomes one. She steps up before the entire club, silences the whispers, directly addresses the concerns, and most importantly, tries to use the power of group dynamics to her advantage. Haruka challenges anyone with concerns to step out into the open, to raise their heads above the crowd. Haruka understands how difficult it is to speak up inside a group, as the series has shown time and again. So it's exactly through her struggles and insecurities that she, and not Asuka, can start diffusing the situation. Meanwhile, Taki has a similar realization and comes to Haruka's aid. He offers anyone interested a second chance at the audition, but this time out in the open, with the entire club allowed to vote. Kaori rises to the occasion, and with that, we're given hope that the issue will soon be resolved for good. So now we reach the day of the second audition. And this time, it turns out that even the ever-confident Reina has doubts about competing against Kaori in front of the entire band. She's well aware that she'll be the villain if she beats Kaori, and so she turns to Kumiko with a question that will finally put her friend to the test. Will Kumiko stand by her side, no matter what happens? Will she be able to renounce the group and follow through on her beliefs? And Kumiko affirms that she will. She declares that she'd be upset if Reina loses, since Reina is built differently from anyone else. And so we head towards the final confrontation, the moment that will test both Reina and Kumiko's resolve to become someone special. Both contestants perform the solo, first Kaori, then Reina. But significantly, during Reina's turn, the camera barely focuses on the performance. Rather, the series shows us the reactions of all the club members, including Kaori's best friends. Each of their faces admit the irrefutable truth. Reina's performance has blown her competitors out of the water. But when the solo comes to a close, there's no applause like with Kaori, just deafening silence. And with that, the vote commences. Back at the start of the series, there's an interaction between Kumiko and Aoi, the single club member who voted to play for fun rather than aiming for nationals. Kumiko complains to Aoi that it wasn't fair how Taki put them on the spot with the votes. But in Aoi's view, Kumiko did something even more unfair. She refused to stick out her neck by not voting at all. At the time, this seemed like a bit of a strange comment. Surely, abstaining from voting can't be that big of a deal, right? There's something incredibly powerful about stories that can make you completely rethink your initial assumptions by the time the credits roll. This is one of those moments. Taki invites all the members of the Kitauji concert band to clap for their preferred candidate, First Kaori. A second-year student and Haruka show their support. Then Reina. And right here, we witness Kumiko Oumae's greatest moment in this series. Without hesitation, the girl who was once terrified of attracting attention within a crowd stands up for what is right. And yet, Kumiko is the only one to do so. The Kitauji concert band has over 60 members. All but 5 of them are cowards. In the end, it all came down to one single factor. Kaori has 2 friends who will stick by her side through thick and thin. Reina has 1. Taki grants Kaori the solo. Democracy has failed for the second time. I won't lie, this is one of the most haunting scenes I've ever witnessed in fiction. Somehow, a show about cute girls playing classical music cuts to the very core of a fundamental flaw in human societies. What gets me about this moment is that it's not even about the group making a wrong decision. After all, the show makes a compelling case for either candidate getting the solo. Rather, what I find truly unsettling is how this moment put its finger on our tendency to look the other way when difficult decisions have to be made. That for every Kumiko out there, there are 50 others who will sit there in silence. At this point, however, Kaori refuses the honor. She now understands that Reina has to be the one to play the solo. Kaori seems to have come to terms with the outcome, just as Haruka hoped she would. But Kaori's decision is not a happy moment where all is good in the world. Instead, we get this gut-wrenching cry from the girl who looks up to Kaori the same way that Kumiko looks up to Reina. This is what follows from Reina's desire to become someone special, to stand out from the crowd. For one to rise to the top, the dreams of others must be shattered. And Kaori is by far not the only one who falls to the wayside in the wake of Kitauji's ambitions. One of them is another Euphonium player, the second-year student Natsuki Nakagawa. Natsuki is another victim of last year's toxicity. At the start of the story, she has lost all motivation to continue playing. But as the band starts getting serious again, and Kumiko pleads with her to resume practice, Natsuki's fire lights up once more. But it's too little, too late. Natsuki can't make up for the lost time. In the cutthroat world of concert bands, there's no place for redemption. What makes Natsuki's failure to qualify even more tragic is that she, like Kaori, turns out to be one of the nicest, most supportive characters in the series. Kumiko is initially terrified that she took her senior's place. The trauma from middle school is still fresh in her mind. But instead of bearing a grudge, Natsuki immediately assuages Kumiko's worries. She makes it clear that she supports Kumiko all the way, and promises that they'll play together next year. In the moral system of sound euphonium, it's those who pursue their own interests over that of the collective who have the last laugh. Characters like Kaori, Haruka, and Natsuki might have played an at least equally essential role in keeping the band together and preventing interpersonal conflicts, but their efforts are never rewarded. The other central character who fails the audition is Kumiko's friend Hazuki. Hazuki joins the band as a complete beginner, and it's through her that the show teaches us all the intricacies of brass instruments. Now, on the one hand, it makes a lot of sense that someone like Hazuki won't make the cut, but what makes her failure to qualify so poignant is her significance to another of the series' major themes. Sound Euphonium uses Hazuki's character to explore the importance of one's love for music. In the first half, the series uses Hazuki as a vehicle to showcase the joy of learning to play an instrument for the first time. In contrast to the fairly experienced musicians that make up most of the cast, Hazuki offers these excited, doe-eyed responses at every step of her journey. All this culminates at the midpoint of the series. Hazuki is now confronted with her lack of skill, and her friends worry that she might lose motivation by her setbacks. And right then, they realize something. Hazuki has never had any opportunities to play together with others. And so, Kumiko, Midori, and Hazuki sit down together, and then the magic happens. Up to this point, Hazuki has been producing sounds. Now, she has made music. Much of this video up to this point has been discussing groups as something mostly negative, as a force that breeds toxicity and conflict, in contrast to the purity of individual efforts. But all of this is put in relief through Hazuki's storyline. It's in this moment that we understand why all these students have come together in a band in the first place. They can produce something even more beautiful by coming together as an ensemble. But the painful thing is that Hazuki has discovered the joy of playing music together right before the auditions. Now, it's easy to imagine that a beginner like Hazuki would have thrived if the club had voted to play for fun. But the club hasn't, and to no surprise, the inexperienced musician fails to make the cut during the auditions. But with her failure to qualify, the series essentially deprives her, the one character who is most closely associated with the joy of music, of this source of happiness. So, where characters like Reina flourish when they rise above the crowds, Hazuki serves to remind us that aiming for the stars will also inevitably cause others to fall through the cracks. This contrast also has major implications for Kumiko's arc. Throughout the series, Kumiko needs to balance two forms of friendship, and on a meta level wavers between two genres of anime. Her interactions with Hazuki and Midori often call to mind this K-On!-esque cutesy slice of life atmosphere. Something that is completely gone whenever she shares the stage with Reina. There's this one scene in particular where Hazuki and Midori suggest inviting Reina to have lunch with them. But as it turns out, Reina has already finished lunch and is busy practicing her solo. This moment highlights that Kumiko's relationship with Reina is fundamentally different from that with her other friends. Kumiko has Hazuki and Midori to share her day-to-day experiences, but Reina is the one who offers her a kind of deeper, personal fulfillment. And at this point, these two aspects of her life don't mesh together. Kumiko's choice between these two different forms of relationships come out most harshly during the summer festival, the moment where she climbs the mountain with Reina. This episode contrasts Kumiko's ascent with the events that concurrently take place down below. Over the course of the season, Hazuki has developed a crush on Shuuichi, and she musters all her courage to ask him out. But unfortunately, Shuuichi rejects her. Midori rushes to comfort Hazuki. Kumiko, however, has chosen for Reina, and so she's not by Hazuki's side when her friend needs her the most. This is perhaps the most powerful juxtaposition in the series. For Kumiko to rise to the top, someone on the bottom has to be crushed. Yet, in a way, Hazuki's losses are not in vain. She too has played a pivotal role for Kumiko's development by the end of the series. While Reina taught Kumiko that it's alright to aim for the stars, Hazuki reminded her of the sense of wonder that she too once experienced by playing music. And there's a third figure who also helps mold Kumiko into who she becomes by the end of the season. Earlier in this video, I touched on how the series parallels the relationship between Kumiko and Reina with that between Haruka and Asuka. This parallel works on another level as well. Asuka, the third-year equivalent of Reina, serves as a final major influence on Kumiko. Asuka is not just one of the best musicians in the band, but she's also, significantly, a euphonium player. But unlike Kumiko, Asuka seems genuinely passionate about her instrument. In her introduction, she's about to give a full lecture on the euphonium. And even though the series portrays Kumiko as an above-average player, Asuka offers her a glimpse of true greatness in her own field. And with that, Asuka shatters Kumiko's belief that playing the euphonium is a sign of compromise, of forfeiting your personal desires in favor of the greater good. Asuka shows Kumiko that you can truly love playing the euphonium and become someone special in the process. So it's through Hazuki, Reina, and Asuka that Kumiko comes to a realization at the end of the season, that she too has come to love playing the euphonium. It seems so simple, so elementary, and yet Kumiko could only come to this understanding after her entire worldview was flipped on its head. And upon realizing this, she just had to break the news to Reina, even though it's now in the middle of the night. And right then, she spots it. Her series of instrument plushies has finally released its Eupho-kun. At last, the world seems ready to embrace the euphonium in its own right.